Good evening, Alec Brainerd here from Artisan Boat Works in Rockport, Maine on a rainy Thursday night. Here to inspect the YOU-YOU tender from the yacht Atlantide. Most likely a original Bugatti launch built in the 1940s. Looks like she probably had a topside restoration done at some point within the last 40 years. The coamings and the seats, the floorboards and the transmission cover, bulkhead, all look relatively new as compared to the rest of the hull. The all-important Bugatti builder's plate on the stern. And as is often the case with restorations, you see that, you know, all the attractive, more visible work was done, but the hull at that time was largely ignored. And you can see the inside of the planking was encapsulated in a really thick layer of, I don't know if it's an epoxy paint, but what it's done is really trapped a lot of moisture inside the hull, and it's led to general weakening. You can see a lot of fresh stress fractures where the forward cradle was, and then on the starboard side, the cradle has actually punctured the hull. Walking around to the bow, the way the boat sits on deck, the low point is forward, and the forefoot here is completely rotten. The construction is amazing. You can see all of these copper rivets. There's a row for every frame, and then an intermediate row fastening the diagonal planks to the fore and aft outer planks. And then you can even see there's a very light layer of canvas between the two layers. So incredibly lightly built, but also thoroughly fastened. The outer planking is about 1/4 of an inch thick, and the inner planking, the diagonals, are probably 1/8 of an inch thick. A little bit of discoloration up at the stem. You can see a short little repair that was done here. Good example actually of seamlessly fitting a new piece into the old structure without having too much of an adverse effect. These white seams are not original. I think they were reefed out and caulked and then even painted. It looks like just paint on the surface in a recent attempt to keep some water out. It's got a puncture in the starboard top sides. It looks relatively recent. And then looking underneath the boat, you can see again she's got this really thick layer of some sort of an epoxy paint, which has really just, you know, done the opposite that it was intended to do. It's kept the water in instead of letting the boat breathe. Up forward on the starboard side of the bottom, there's a series of short planks with closely spaced butts, so evidence of a repair that was done. It's all pretty loose. There's basically 3 planks right next to each other that are only, you know, 1 foot to 18 inches long, so a fairly localized repair. Skeg bars come loose. Yeah, just lots of this thick, flaking epoxy paint. Working our way aft here, around the transom. You can see along the keel, there's some deterioration at the back of the keel. It's all pretty punky. But the prop and the running gear are adorable. as is this original rudder and tiller. The original transom is in pretty good shape. Interesting that she's called YOU-YOU because in the early advertising, this is referred to as the YOU-YOU tender or YOU-YOU launch. So this may actually be the original one. Looking up under the stern, you can see that when she was restored in the probably the 80s or early 90s, I would guess, they had the deck off, and that's when they did all this thick painting. Relatively new floorboards. These curved oak pieces are, again, they're beautifully built, but questionable whether they're original to the boat. They don't show up in any of the early advertising. Beautiful steering wheel, nice brass hub, and the cable steering that you can either steer from forward or aft using the cute little tiller. The throttle on the starboard side that still turns nicely. The gear shift. The little running lights. And then under the hood, I guess you could call it, there's this little Bugatti engine, an electric starter and copper exhaust pipe, hand crank starting, little copper carburetor on the front, so can't wait to hear that run. I'm sure what this little guy is here. Some sort of a button there that might actually be the starter button. And the fuel tank, stainless steel fuel tank with bronze hangers and a little fill cap here. There's the overall view. I'm gonna walk over to the computer and take a look at a few files that I found online that might be interesting. This is an original Bugatti advertising brochure, and shows a few different accessories that were available with the boat. There's the forward half. I love the contrast here between the gray on deck and the varnished mahogany hull. I think were you to build a new one, it would be interesting to use teak for all of that gray and let it weather. And then the engine. So this is a nice picture of an original boat that looks to be quite weathered. Appears as though they made both an outboard version and an inboard version. So this is obviously the outboard version. A little bow chock and some handles on the quarters. Here's another outboard that's been restored. You can see the lack of the white seams in the top sides. If you go right in, you can still see all those little rivets, which were painstakingly installed by the Italians. Here's another beautifully restored outboard. That might be the same boat again. Here's one that looks remarkably similar to YOU-YOU, to the boat that's here. It's got the storage compartment in the stern, which would lead one to believe that it's also the inboard model. All the details look very similar. I don't see the fill cap for the engine in the foredeck, but the fuel tank might be located a little bit differently. One thing that I really like is the bright finish on the inside. You can see just a thin varnish layer leaves everything exposed so that it's able to breathe, and finish that way. A boat like this will last forever. Here's a really beautifully restored one. Has some different detailing, but an example of the finish you could achieve if you were to do a full restoration. So, turning back to the vessel at hand here, the question is really what to do with it, how to approach the restoration, and a lot of the times these questions and decisions are more sort of philosophical or moral than they are practical. Oftentimes, the greatest challenge in a restoration is ironically restoration work that had been done previously, because it's oftentimes locking in or making the access difficult to the original structure, which is where the root of the problem lies with this boat. What really complicates the structural work on YOU-YOU is this inner diagonal layer of planking that's sandwiched between the steam bent frames and the fore and aft outer planks, to get to replace a section of diagonal planking. Either a lot of frames from the inside would have to come out, or nearly all of the planks on the outside would have to come out. So one option is what I would call a complete restoration, where we would very carefully take the boat apart from the top down and get her to a bare hull, carefully documenting every square inch as we go, and then essentially take apart the boat piece by piece, and replace everything that's bad, and then put her back together, utilizing as much original material as we possibly could. Unfortunately, because of how lightly built the boat was to start with, and how badly deteriorated the hull is, I think the majority of the hull would be new by the time it was finished, but there'd be no loss of pedigree, or you'd still have the same boat if it was done very carefully and respectfully. Another option would be to repair it, whereby we'd just disturb as little of the original structure as possible. We obviously have to open up quite a bit here in the bow to get back to the inner stem, and scarf in using epoxy new diagonal pieces and new fore and aft pieces. I think we could repair this forward area and the acute damage where the bow chocks push through the hull, as well as the stern area where there's some separation at the keel. That could all be repaired, which would allow the boat to float and sort of be appreciated, but it wouldn't be addressing the sort of overall condition of a lot of this interior wood. You can see this is looking on the starboard side at the turn of the bilge, aft under the seat, and that thick coating has really been detrimental to the boat. It's actually the coating is harder than the wood, so trying to get it off would be difficult without taking a lot of wood with it. And it's just, there's a lot of moisture intrusion, and further opportunity for more moisture to get in. So I think if we were to do you know, what I would call the, you know, localized fixes, the boat wouldn't be super usable, and it's questionable how long she'd last. I think that would be a good method, maybe if the goal were to put the boat on display. You know, I think we could clean her up, we could fix the acute problems, maybe repaint the inside of the hull with something a little bit more beige and less jarring than the white, you know, and paint the bottom, get her cleaned up. But you know, I think that that the full restoration is definitely worth considering. You know, that would make the boat stunningly beautiful and usable. You know, she could either be displayed in a collection or used as a tender to another boat, or just enjoyed, you know, with kids on the lake or what have you. So yeah, that's YOU-YOU. Happy to answer any additional questions, and yeah, look forward to coming up with a plan going forward for her. Next to YOU-YOU is Coletta. I'll give you a quick once over on her. She's a very hefty, looks to be of English origin, launch that was built by, you know, an unknown builder. There's no plaque or you know, any history or pedigree that I know of. The varnished planking is in, well, solid condition, but not very attractive. You can see that there have been some significant checks that have been filled with epoxy. But she's strong, I think. I don't see any rot or broken frames or any significant signs of deterioration. She's got a nice little Yanmar 1GM10 engine. Needs some electrical work and, you know, just a general tidying up, maybe some new cushions. So my advice on this one, I think, would just be to clean her up, reattach the rub rail where it's coming off, you know, varnish everything, give the engine a good once over, and then decide where she'll be most useful. If she is going to be used on deck of Atlantide or another larger boat, we could fabricate some bronze lifting eyes, either in the bottom of the hull or on the deck that line up with the davits. I think that would make it a lot easier to get her on and off the boat. Maybe some new cushions, but, you know, relatively straightforward stuff. Nice little bronze bilge pump there. So that's Coletta. All right, signing off.